hometowns. We moved a lot as a kid, but Missoula and Montana generally has always had a very special place in my heart. Both my parents are from Montana, and we spent a lot of time here as kids. The public library wasn't quite like this when I was a kid, so it's been very cool to come and see the amazing space you've created for yourselves and opportunities for the little ones to learn and really develop their curiosity. I was a very curious kid. I had parents and family who really had this neutral buoyancy lab where we actually submerge underwater and practice full 8-hour spacewalks. This is us at SpaceX training to launch in our capsule, learning everything we need to know for the dynamic phases of flight, like launch and reentry. And this is us right before launch at Kennedy Space Center, getting ready for the big day. And here we are in the historic suit-up room at Kennedy Space Center, where not only the Apollo astronauts, but also the shuttle astronauts got ready for their launch days. So we put on our suits, do leak checks, make sure everything's ready, and then we walk out for a final wave goodbye to the team that's prepared us for this huge moment, and also a final wave goodbye to our families. If you launch SpaceX, you also get to ride in Teslas to the launch pad, so you'll see that in a minute. It's the only time I've driven in a Tesla, also the only time I've launched to space, so big day for everybody. So this is the launch escape, or the launch access system. There's kind of like a tunnel way up there. Everyone tries to do the lean back to see the top of the rocket in their suits, which is a little awkward because they're not made for being on Earth, really. They're more made for being in the capsule. But we take the fateful walk to finally load into our capsule. These folks in the black jumpsuits work for SpaceX, so they're the team that gets us in the capsule, gets us strapped in, closes the hatch, does the leak check, and then gives the launch control team the go that we are ready in the capsule and ready for the terminal countdown. My mom's here today, and I always like to watch my mom watching the launch video. She was there in person, so was my aunt, who's here. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition. And liftoff. We launched at night, so you get to see the engines really light up the clouds, which is pretty cool. It takes about 12 minutes, this launch sequence, to get from sitting on the launch pad on Earth into a microgravity orbit around the planet. So this is a really exciting dynamic phase of flight. We were actually really surprised, though, how smooth it was. It almost felt like if you had tricked us and said, just kidding, you're in the simulator, I think we might have believed you. We just felt so well prepared for this moment. But you can actually see the speed we're going and the altitude we're at. So it kind of tops out at 27,000 kilometers per hour during launch.
Dragon, CE, welcome to orbit. Hope you enjoyed the ride from F9. Dragon will take you from here. Safe travels.
Dragon copies.
And Kayla, give us 5 minutes. We'll try to get you updated timelines so we know our final altitude and the goal date.
Good evening, Europe. Guten Abend, Deutschland. This is Endurance. Crew Dragon 3. We're flying currently along Italy, heading towards northern Europe. On the left side is Germany. We would like to show you this from the space view, but it's nice and dark. But we just saw a few minutes ago our final destination, the International Space Station, floating in space and shining like a diamond, only 30 kilometers forward of us. And that was such an emotional moment. We all very thrilled, very excited, and we can't wait to arrive there in a few hours.
We had about 24 hours in free flight, this period where we're just kind of in orbit around the Earth on our way to the space station. And then we arrive. Whenever I see this footage, it doesn't seem real to me, but these are captured from space station external cameras of our approach to the docking port. And this is what it's all about. This is the moment we've been training for 2 years in earnest, but kind of our whole lives, the arrival on the space station. Mark Van de Hyde, we joined him halfway through his historic year-long mission. He has the record for most continuous days in space. And you'll see he's strategically stationed to catch the rookies who aren't used to being in microgravity. So he gives you a hug, but then also plants you on a secure handrail as you're learning how to get around in the world. In many ways, it feels like that's kind of the completion of a journey, safely getting to the space station, but really we're just getting started. The crew, we joined a Soyuz crew who launched on a Russian vehicle who had been there for a while, and then immediately got to work on this gorgeous platform. Maybe I'm kicking things down here. Even one technical failures here. There we go. So the International Space Station, first and foremost, is a laboratory in space. It's a national laboratory. During our mission, our crew executed over 350 independent scientific investigations. In many cases, this represents the life's work of scientific teams on the ground who've been waiting sometimes decades to get their new hardware, their experiment into space, and get results from these incredible experiments. So we do all sorts of different things. A lot of times we're the test subjects, like in those virtual reality environments. We also did a bunch of different plant experiments when I was up there, which was really cool. So scientists are trying to understand not only how to improve crop growth on the Earth for things like climate change, but also how we might grow crops in space for longer duration missions. Raj is showing our blood draw station here. So we all become phlebotomists, people who draw blood, draw our own blood and each other's blood, but we kind of donate every bodily fluid to science at some point during our mission, and we can talk about that in Q&A if that's your kind of gross interested in that. But we also do a lot of fundamental research science. So this is a really cool furnace where we study how flames burn in microgravity. We do technology demonstrations, a lot of times involving universities. So here I'm loading a CubeSat deployer into an equipment airlock. So those will head outside, be grabbed by a robotic arm, and then shot out into space, a bunch of little tiny satellites. This is the cupola, everyone's favorite place on the space station. It's a 360-degree view back of our home planet. So in addition to hanging out in there, just because it's awesome, we're also taking photographs on behalf of scientists on the ground, and sometimes aiding international disaster response efforts. When there's things like volcanic explosions or flooding, they'll ask us to take pictures so they can get real-time data of what's going on the Earth. This is Matthias's least favorite experiment. I'm measuring the pressure of his eye. He really did not like this one, but was a good sport. We have really high-end laboratory equipment up there, so we have state-of-the-art glove boxes that allow us to do a lot of biological research. And the space station actually grew while we were up there. This is a module that the Russian space agency built being delivered. It's actually a docking port. It kind of looks like that big white beach ball. So that came up while we were up there. We're always working to upgrade, maintain the station, repair it if it breaks while we're up there. And so that's what we do spacewalks for. This actually was my first spacewalk with Tom Marshburn. We had a communications antenna that failed, and so we had to go outside to replace it with a new one. A piece of equipment broke, so we removed it and put a spare one out there to make sure we had the right communications redundancy. And man, what incredible experience. This was about 3 weeks after I got to space, so it was pretty fresh up there, but was lucky to go out the door with Tom Marshburn, who's a very experienced spacewalker for my very first experience out there. He's on the top of the robotic arm there, kind of as high as you can get on the space station. But we also have to live and work up there, right? We have to keep our bodies healthy. We do that through this weightlifting equipment or things like running on the treadmill, which we'll see here in a second. So that's Matthias doing some bench press, me out for a little jog. We cut each other's hair. I kind of questioned Matthias's choice of barber with Raja there, but he always looked pretty good. Brush our teeth, just like normal everyday life stuff, being humans in space. At least once a week, we gathered for a big family-style dinner like this, our entire crew. A little bit easier to pass food across the table when it floats, but you gotta be careful, like don't lose the mashed potatoes. You can share your drinks with your friends. We also had a lot of visitors while we were up there, so that's a spaceflight participant mission where the Russians brought up 2 Japanese spaceflight participants, kind of like space tourists. We're up there for the holidays, so those are my Christmas presents for my crewmates. We had a cookie decorating contest and could really do some nice 3D designs without gravity affecting our frosting blobs. Really, we kind of become a family up there, living and working together in such close quarters for 6 months. This is a Russian spacewalk. This is a time lapse I shot, and I really like it because they kind of look like cockroaches out there, like moving around, but they're outfitting that new module I mentioned. This is a cargo vehicle called a Cygnus. It's built by Northrop Grumman, but we actually capture it with the robotic arm. So Raja here is flying the robotic arm like a big claw machine almost, reaching out and grabbing it so we can plug it into the space station and get inside to get all the new supplies we need. So me and Mark playing with bubbles of water, because why wouldn't you? We're having a contest to see who can get the biggest bubble, and I did win that day. This is Matthias seeing how many times he can flip around without hitting something, I think. Incredible feats of strength, doing a push-up with 3 of your friends on your back. Or a squat. Mark's very strong, so. Inventing new space sports. We didn't quite clarify the rules of this, so. And then this is kind of the end of our mission where we really ramped up and we're super busy. I went out for my second spacewalk, Raj's first. We were installing a support structure for a new solar array, which is how we generate power on the space station. So it's kind of a giant 750-pound erector set that we were like taking out in one strut at a time and building it out there. A new Soyuz crew joined us in their fancy yellow jumpsuits. Then we did another spacewalk. Raja and Matthias went outside to do a whole range of space station upgrades. It was kind of a grab bag, but it was really cool for them because they got to visit parts of station astronauts don't even get to see very often on spacewalks. Then we said goodbye to the Soyuz crew that we spent the majority of our mission with. Mark spent 355 days in space continuously. We welcomed the first private astronaut mission in the history of the space station. So this is the Axiom 1 crew who joined us for, they were supposed to be there for 7 days, they stayed for 15. So think about the last time your house guest did that. We're pretty busy. And then we welcomed NASA's SpaceX Crew 4 crew who was up there to replace us. Really bittersweet, super cool to see your friends in space. But it was tough for us because our crew, if you can't tell, we had a wonderful time and loved each other a lot. So leaving was really tough. This, believe it or not, was the best take of the flyby we were attempting in our spacesuits. I would say this is not our best work. We could have done better. But yeah, the fateful day, so this would have been May 5th of last year when we actually undocked from the space station. We were in free flight again for about 24 hours on our way home, but here we are doing the vehicle checkouts right before undocking from the station. So we just kind of push off. There's a tiny little burn to help separate us from the space station. There's some fancy like rocket science, orbital mechanics stuff going on here, but we actually fly up and over the space station and then down into a lower orbit about 30 miles closer to the Earth. And we spent 24 hours in free flight on our way home, which was actually really cool because for the first time in 6 months we weren't very busy and we just got time to look out the window and enjoy those last incredible views of the planet before we splashed down. This is re-entry, so you can actually see some of the heat shield sublimating off and creating some plasma right there. These are the parachutes coming out. Those are kind of the drogue chutes that stabilize the lanes that are about to pop out here. One of the best moments of your space flight is when the parachutes successfully deploy because you know you will live. splashing down in the Gulf of Mexico here. Special little rock backwards there. Could have done without that, if I'm being honest. Splashdown in the Gulf of Mexico off the coast of Florida. So right now, Dragon is
On behalf of the entire SpaceX team, welcome home. Willkommen auf der Erde. It's been an absolute honor to support you on your mission.
Looks a little bit more like a toasted marshmallow after we've made our way back through the Earth's atmosphere than that beautiful, pristine vehicle you saw at the beginning. They actually refurbish these capsules and reuse them, so they'll clean her up before the next crew takes her on a ride. So we're incredibly grateful to be home, of course, and get reconnected with our loved ones. But like I said, for our crew, it was definitely a bittersweet arrival. We're really well supported by the SpaceX team, but I think for me, it's these kinds of views that we experience every time we look out the window. This incredible perspective of our home planet that really makes you reconsider, your role in the world and what you're going to do with your tiny hope of time on the planet to make it better for the next generation, which is here today. But it was an incredibly privileged vantage point, and an incredible opportunity for us to contribute to the amazing mission NASA is executing every single day aboard the space station. So thank you so much. That's a little 15-minute overview of 6 months in space. And I'm hopeful that it sparks some interesting questions from you guys. So I think, do we have more microphones that we're going to pass around, or are we just going to, we might, oh yeah, we can use the back. So I think, well, look at that, Slavin or Kelly, somebody can help us find our questions. Do rocks float in space? Yeah, so being in space is really interesting. It kind of looks like we're floating and flying, right? Sometimes people say there's no gravity in space, but when we're in low Earth orbit, you're always being acted on by gravity, actually anywhere in space. It just depends on the biggest thing you're close to, and in this case, we're close to the Earth. But what's interesting is when you're in orbit around the Earth, it's kind of like you're in free fall, and everything else around you is in free fall at the same speed. So it feels like things are floating or flying, so yes, absolutely rocks would appear to float in space.
Did you ever, walk on the moon or something?
Did I ever walk on the moon? I have not walked on the moon. I did do the spacewalks I showed you, but that's a really interesting question for right now because NASA is actually just at the beginning stages of a program called the Artemis program, which is our return to the moon. A few months ago, we did a test flight of the Space Launch System rocket, the Orion space capsule, and so we sent an uncrewed vehicle all the way to the orbit of the moon. It got further from the planet than any human-rated vehicle has ever flown before. And we just announced the Artemis 2 crew, which will be the first crewed test flight of that mission, launching at the end of 2024. So they will launch, orbit the Earth a few times, and then head to the moon to orbit the moon a few times before coming home. And we hope to land on the moon in the next couple of years. So we're sending human beings back to the surface of the moon. And eventually, I bet you when you're applying to be an astronaut, you might be heading to Mars, even further from home. So we'll see. Think about that.
Where did you sleep?
Where did we sleep? That's an excellent question. So on the space station, we have little bedrooms, kind of bedroom office spaces. They're called crew quarters, but they're about 6 feet tall and 3 feet by 3 feet long and wide. It's kind of like a little pod. And we have computers in there where we read our email and call our families, but we also have sleeping bags in there. So we string our sleeping bags up in there. It's kind of like a little space cocoon. Some people like to feel really tightly strapped to the wall, so it feels more like they're on Earth in bed. I move around a lot when I sleep, so I didn't like to be tied down like that. So I was kind of free floating inside my sleeping bag. But it's a lot like camping. sleeping in a sleeping bag every night.
What day did you leave?
So we launched, I think, on November 11th of 2021, and then landed on May 6th of 2022. So I was up there for 177 days.
Did any rocks come close to the space shuttle?
So did any rocks come close to the space shuttle? Yeah, so one of the real big challenges we're having that's getting worse and worse every day is debris in orbit around the Earth. When satellites break up or are decommissioned, we're not using them anymore, but we don't always have a plan to deorbit them, get them out of space. So a lot of trash, there's like space junk up there. And so we actually partner with the Space Force and the Air Force. They track all objects in the orbit around the space over a certain size, and if they think that there's a chance it could come near the space station, they let us know and we move the space station out of the way.
So when you eat and drink, does the food go down your chest, your stomach, or does it float up?
Eating in space and drinking in space is a really weird thing to get used to. I think the first time I ate in space, usually we use spoons. Surface tension is really powerful in space. You saw those globes of water we were playing with. Without gravity, it's just a really powerful force. So you can, hold your spoon upside down with soup on it. It's not going to go anywhere. But I think putting food in my mouth and chewing it for the first time felt really weird because gravity is not pulling it down onto my tongue. It'd be like doing a handstand and trying to have a snack. It's like very weird experience. And then once the food gets into your stomach, it doesn't settle in the same way. It floats around. And so that makes you feel full a lot earlier. So you eat like a little bit and feel like you just had a Thanksgiving dinner. And so it takes a while to get used to that. So usually early on in missions, astronauts have trouble eating enough calories. We're working out every day. And sometimes people lose a little bit of weight at the beginning of their mission, but then we get used to it and it becomes normal to us.
Why were you in space and why were you in an astronaut suit?
So I wanted to go to space because I believe in the amazing mission that we're doing at NASA. So I'm a naval officer. I joined the military to serve my country, and I joined NASA to do that in a different way. And so all of those scientific experiments we're doing up there that I showed you, we're contributing to this huge base of scientific knowledge that's doing all sorts of things, like helping doctors find cures to new diseases, understanding how to keep people healthy, and preparing us for future space missions. So that's why I was up there. We wear spacesuits to help keep us safe. So the ones that we wore in the capsule, we wear those just in case there's an emergency in the capsule and say there's a hole and we can't keep pressure inside the capsule. It's kind of like a mini space capsule inside your capsule. So that gives us air to breathe and keeps us cool. And when we do a spacewalk, it's like a mini spacecraft out there with you because in space, there's no air. It's called a vacuum. So there's no air to breathe. And so in order to stay alive while we're out there and do the work we're doing, we need kind of a tiny spaceship to work inside, and that's what our spacesuits are.
How big did your bubble get?
Okay, so my bubble got pretty big, like bigger than my head in the end. And what we're doing, it takes a lot of water, and once you let the water float around, it can kind of make a giant mess. And so a lot of times the mission control teams on the ground, if they see us playing with water, they're like a little worried it's gonna get on some equipment. So you gotta have towels ready, or you gotta drink it. And that's what Mark and I were trying to do, drink it before it hit anything. So you don't have a lot of time. You gotta make the biggest bubble you can, and then we were blowing air bubbles inside the water bubble to make it grow.
Were you relieved when you got back to Earth to eat normal food?
Yeah, definitely. I'm a big food-motivated person. My crewmate Mark called me the yellow lab of the crew because I'm like always want a snack and it makes me really happy to eat. So I was excited to get back, but actually this food in space was really, really good. The thing that gets to us after a while is lack of variety because you can't just like go to the store or go through a drive-thru if you're craving a hamburger. You only have what you have with you on board. But after I got used to being back, when I first got back, I felt pretty sick. But after a couple of days, I was ready to eat all my favorite foods again. And so that was nice, for sure.
when you had a Mars, have you ever driven a Mars rover?
Have I ever driven a Mars rover?
Yeah.
No, but we do have rovers on Mars. The Jet Propulsion Lab, JPL, they're the ones who have launched those really cool rovers. And so we have one on Mars right now called Perseverance. And Perseverance even has a tiny helicopter with it called Ingenuity. That's amazing. Does aerial reconnaissance for it to figure out where the rover should go. And eventually we do plan to send humans to Mars, and we'll probably work with rovers to kind of partner on, there's some things robots are really good at, and there's some things that humans are really good at. So we'll probably work with rovers when we go to Mars to do the best geology science we can while we're there.
Who videoed it?
Who took the videos and like that you saw on there? Is that what you mean? Where is this? Back here. Okay. So we have a lot of different people taking video. We have videos on outside of the space station that were taking pictures of us while we were flying in and out. And we have a ton of cameras that we try to use to sort of document everything we're doing up there. So sometimes we're our own photographers and videographers, and sometimes there's cameras that we're controlling from the ground.
Have you ever used the Canadarm?
Yes, so the Canadarm is the robotic arm that you saw in some of those videos. And we got to operate it a lot, actually. So Raja flew it out and grabbed that spacecraft I told you about. And we also use it on spacewalks. So on my first spacewalk, Tom actually rode on the end of the robotic arm, carrying some big equipment. And during Raja and Matthias's spacewalk, I flew it from inside. Raja was on the robotic arm, and I flew him around to different work sites so that he could do some tasks. We have kind of a foot platform that you can stand on, and then we just fly people around to where they need to be to do work.
So clearly a lot of amazing humans, or like a limited way, a super small limited amount of amazing humans apply to be an astronaut. How do you think you got chosen? What was the special sauce that got you chosen?
You know, it's a really hard question to answer because I think it's kind of like, you know, hard work and dreaming big comes together with a lot of luck and timing. Because, so my class, we had 18,500 applicants for my class and 12 Americans got selected. And so it's just a really hard thing to know what helps you stand out from such an incredible pool of applicants. Because everyone is so technically qualified. And actually, when I went for my first round interview, the interview is 10 at a time, but they bring 120 people down for the first round of in-person interviews. I was convinced they had called me by mistake when I met the other people there, because I was just like, I do not belong with these humans. But I think for me, it kind of made me feel sort of this healthy fatalism. Like, I really respected the selection committee panel. There were people who I admired and looked up to. And I didn't know what they had seen in me, but I wanted to just be my authentic self, be honest about my strengths and weaknesses, and why I thought I could be a good member of the team, but have the humility to know that I didn't really know what it took to be an astronaut. It was a pretty new dream for me. And so I was just honest about that and just decided, you know, if they think I'm a good fit, they're right. And if they think I'm not a good fit, they're probably right about that too. So I just tried to be myself in the interview process as much as I could, and was lucky that they decided to take a chance on me and my potential. I'm one of the younger astronauts in our office. We had a pretty young class, actually. 4 of the people in our class were 29 when we started, which was pretty unusual. But for me, I think it was an incredible opportunity to build on the skills that I learned in the classroom, that I learned on the sports fields and like the cross-country course, and of course in the Navy, in my experiences there. And so, yeah, I don't know. I think we're all just really, really lucky, more than anything.
How does it feel like to wash your hair?
Yeah, washing your hair in space is a little bit weird. And I actually, maybe your parents can, I have a video on YouTube and on Instagram of how I wash my hair in space that maybe your parents could help show you after the event. But we don't have running water in space because you saw how water behaves, right? It floats. It's never going to fall down on your head like it does in the shower down here. So it's kind of like taking a shower when you're camping. We have bags of water that I use to like squirt, the same ones we were drinking out of with the straw. I squirt water in my hair, put soap in it and suds it up, and then the hard part is rinsing all the soap out. It takes a long time. Like, probably took me 15 minutes or so to wash my hair, so I didn't do it every day. It was more like every 5 or 6 days. just because it took a lot of time and I didn't always have that much time in my day. But once you get used to it, it's pretty normal. Just rinse it out a couple of times and then let it air dry. You're on your way. I'll answer yours next, okay?
What advice would you give to people who want to work for NASA, and what's the biggest obstacle you had to overcome to get to where you are today?
The biggest advice I would say for people who want to work with NASA is really find your unique passion and chase it, especially at your age, right? These subjects, like working in STEM fields, they're challenging, but I think they're hard for everybody. Doesn't mean, I remember like having this experience in high school, like, hey, math and science classes are getting really hard. Does that mean I'm not good at math and science? You know, having this like a kind of moment of doubt. But really they're just hard for everybody because they're hard subjects. And I had good teachers that helped me persevere through that. And because I was passionate about it, I loved those classes even though they were challenging. So I think that's a really important thing. But the other thing I would say is space flight and what we do at NASA is a team sport. It is so complicated to get human beings into space, keep them alive, and help them do something of value in this really denied environment. And so, because of that, we really need experts from all over, all different backgrounds, all different perspectives, and nobody can know everything you need to know about the space station to make it work. So it takes a really special team to do that successfully. And I think for me, I always tried to find ways to learn the communication skills, the conflict management skills, learn about myself, my own strengths and weaknesses, what I could bring to a team, and where I needed to work to be better, so that in these tough moments, I could be a strong member of a team that was coming together to make good decisions and get that mission done. So I'd say think about how you can develop those skills, whether it's clubs, sports, all sorts of things like that, will really prepare you for those moments. Zayden asked me a question right here. I met him downstairs earlier. He asked, are there moon cars? Yeah, so we have rovers on the moon just like we do on Mars. And we're building moon cars to take with us to the moon on Artemis missions. So they had ones on Apollo that are kind of like dune buggies. They're not enclosed. So we call those unpressurized rovers. But we're also building pressurized rovers that we could actually live and work inside for up to 30 days and do spacewalks from. So we're gonna have some really cool moon cars. So you watch for that in the next couple of years. I think you'll think they're pretty cool.
What's your favorite galaxy and planet?
What's my favorite galaxy and planet? Well, as you know, there's a lot to choose from. It's a tough decision. But I am actually partial to planet Earth. I really think it's extraordinary that our planet exists at all and that human beings exist upon it. It's really amazing to me. And I think seeing it from orbit really increased my love and fascination with our planet. The first thing that popped into my head when I saw the Earth from space for the first time is it's a biosphere. And anybody who's taken a biology class knows, of course, the Earth is a biosphere. But it was just this fundamental fact, right? Instead of seeing the Earth the way you see it in classroom maps, you know, with all of these borders and everything's in a different color, it was just this interconnected organism, so fragile. You can actually see the edge of the Earth's atmosphere, the only thing dividing us from space. In many ways, we are all astronauts, right? We're hurtling through the galaxy, through the solar system right now, protected by that thin layer of atmosphere. It's just like incredible to me how special that is. And for me, like I said, it drove home how interconnected we are and how important it is that we work together on the amazing challenges that are facing our planet. Because without that kind of cooperation, we can't be stewards of this planet in the way we need to be.
What are all their names?
The names of the crew?
Yeah.
Yeah, so of course I was up there. On my launch crew, I had Tom, Raja, and Matthias. And then we joined Mark, Piotr, and Anton. So that's who I was up there for most of the time. But I actually saw 24 other people while I was in space for 6 months because we had so many visitors. So that was pretty lucky because sometimes you don't see that many people in space, but it's pretty fun to welcome new people to space every couple of months.
We have one over here.
How did some of your spaceship break?
How did our spaceship break?
How did some of your spaceship break?
How did some of your spaceship break?
Okay, yeah, from the part where we were coming back in through the atmosphere?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have this thing called a heat shield. If you've seen space capsules, they're kind of shaped like sort of little cones and with flat bottoms, flat but kind of rounded bottoms. Those have these special materials on them that allow us to withstand the extraordinary temperature and resistance of coming back through the Earth's atmosphere. So it's actually designed for some of it to break off, sublimate off, and that's actually dissipating energy to keep the capsule cool enough so that we're comfortable inside. So our capsule luckily is it's designed to break a little bit in that part, like little pieces of the heat shield break off on purpose because it helps keep the capsule cool.
How long does it take to get around the Earth?
How long does it take to get around the Earth? So when we are on the space station, we're about 250 miles above the surface of the Earth, and we're going 17,500 miles per hour. And so we orbit the Earth about every 90 minutes. So in a 24-hour period, that means there's 16 sunsets and sunrises. It's gorgeous every single time, and we spend about half our time over the sunlit part of the Earth and half of our time over the shadowed part of the Earth. So we're just circling the planet, and we're at a pretty high inclination orbit, which means that we're at an angle relative to the equator. And so if you looked at a flat map of the Earth, it kind of like we're making this giant wave up and down. So we get pretty much as far north as London and as far south as the tip of South America or Australia. And so we cover a huge swath of the Earth, and if the weather on Earth is right, you can even see to like Antarctica. You can sometimes see, icebergs floating around in the water and like the coast of Antarctica and stuff like that. So you can see almost the whole planet at some point during your orbit around the Earth.
How many tests do you have to take until you go into space?
So we do take a lot of tests as astronauts. But luckily, it's a really supportive training environment. We have to learn a lot of new things when we become astronauts because people are coming from all sorts of different backgrounds. I came from the Navy and the submarine force. I had colleagues who were pilots before they came, or planetary geologists, or biologists, or engineers. And so we all had different jobs, and nobody knows how to be an astronaut until they get selected and get to go through training. So the big tests we have during our training are our spacewalk skills, learning how to fly. So you saw that the T-38 airplane that we fly, we have tests to certify us to fly that airplane. The robotics operations, the Canadarm that they asked about before, that we get operated to fly and operate that. Russian, we all learn to speak the Russian language because of our partnership with the Russian Space Agency. And then we also get certified in space station systems and emergency response. So they're not really written tests like you take in school, they're all practical tests. So we go and they give us a scenario or some sort of procedure to run, and we prove that we can get through it successfully. And so when you do all of that, you graduate astronaut school and become eligible for a mission assignment. And then when your crew gets together, we have these special simulations where we pretend we're doing a complex operation in space, and we certify together as a crew, so it's like a team test. Our whole team gets tested together to make sure that we're ready to launch and go work in space for 6 months.
How many women have been to space? And also, how do you mentally prepare for a mission?
I actually don't know that stat, how many women have been to space. I think I was like the 501st person in space. And I'm not sure what subset of that are women. I should probably know that about myself, but I've never looked it up. And the second part of your question was, how do you mentally prepare? Yeah, it's a lot, obviously. Like, I think it drives it home watching my mom watch this video, like I was saying, because it's a really weird thing to do. When I was in the submarine force, you just disappear into the ocean. Nobody's watching you do that up close. My husband was in the Army for 10 years. I didn't watch him go to Afghanistan and go on a patrol. That'd be terrible. But rocket launches are weird. You invite all your closest family and friends to watch you blast into space, do the most dangerous thing you've ever done in your life. But in those moments, I think what's amazing about it is we are so well prepared as a crew. We've practiced every normal and abnormal thing the training teams can think of, getting through those, and that prepares us for the things we couldn't even think of, because we get surprised in our training scenarios all the time and have to work through it. But I think the most important part is you've developed this deep trust for the people sitting next to you in the capsule, but also the team supporting us from the ground. The crew we're on represents this tiny slice of what it takes to human spaceflight happen. There are thousands of people across the planet who are making that happen at any given moment. And so both the SpaceX team, the NASA team, and then our international partner mission control teams, we just trusted them. We understood the risk we were taking. We believed they were worth it for what we were going to be able to contribute to our mission up there, our scientific mission up there. And so you're just kind of at peace with it, honestly. You're ready to go. You've trained for that moment for so long. And so when you're getting strapped in that capsule, they rotate the seats back and you hear the terminal count. The moment of launch, Falcon 9's a cool rocket, obviously, seeing the launch, but as the thrust builds underneath you, there's some vibration in the vehicle. And then there's like this magic moment where you feel yourself start to lift off the pad, but you're not really accelerating that much yet. And so you almost feel like, I felt like we hung there for a second, but you're not on the earth anymore. You like feel the vehicle start to move. And in that moment, I was flooded with the purest emotion I've ever felt in my life of just joy. I was excited to go on this incredible adventure with my friends, my crewmates. And so I think because of that preparation, that trust in your own preparation, but the trust in the preparation of your team, even things like spacewalks, it gets your attention. You know you're out in the vacuum of space. It's a really crazy experience, but in the moment you're never afraid. And then afterwards you're kind of like, whoa, did that just happen? But I think it's just a lot of mental preparation, good analog training, and trust in the people around you that helps you get through those moments.
Okay, we have time for 2 more questions. And one right here. And then after that, we'll just have just a few minutes for pictures though. So just like 5 minutes. So